Okay, I will begin now. Assalamualaikum. First of all, boleh dengar ya? Can you hear me? Okay. So first of all, I would like to thanks to Professor Dr. Kalavathy for accepting our invitation, for accepting IPSis invitation to become as the speaker for today. So Professor Dr. Kalavathy, a little bit brief information about her achievement in supervision. That she has graduated as a main and co-supervisor, 9 PhD students, and then 23 master students as co and main supervisors, and currently 2 master student active and 3 active PhD students. So I believe that she has a wide experience in evaluating of the thesis student in the perspective of the supervisor and as well in perspective of the panel of examiners. So before I pass this presentation to her, I would like to brief you all about this slide. Boleh nampak kan slide saya ni? So this slide is about our current standing for postgraduate studies, that minimally as supervisors, as the panel of assessors, you should know about the current status and then what we are in IPSis pushing for. So a little bit sorry, my name is Professor Madya Dr. Aman Muhammad Ehsan. I'm head of the postgraduate studies for research program. Okay, so current total students that have registered for 2020 is about 1,836. New student will register in October. So master student 1,446 for masters, and PhD student 319. So we hope that we can the numbers will new student will getting higher for the next year. We can exceed for the last year numbers, which is about 3,807. So hopefully by this year, even though with the COVID-19 pandemic, we hope that we can exceed that numbers. Yeah. So this is the numbers for intake as according to the faculties. So as you can see here, for the PH, number of total student for masters is 309. This is for the research and mixed mode. Yeah. And then PhD student for the Faculty of Pharmacy, 137. And then for the medic, what is medic? 149. And then PhD student, 80. And then dentistry, 45. 56 for PhD. And then for the HS, 253 for master student. HS, where is more HS? HS 86 for the PhD student. That's total student numbers, but current active students should be less than that. Okay, so this is a minimum that you should know about our research timeline, which is starting from the student do the registration until the Senate letters, and the calculation for the GOT is calculated from the date of the student registration until date of the student receive their Senate letters. When they endorse for the Senate for their viva voce. And throughout the processes, they have to go through all this, like for example, present the DRP, getting the ethics approval, and then do the data collection, write the thesis, and then submit notice of examination. The supervisor rule here to nominate the thesis examiner, including for the PhD students. And then this is a thesis submission, where we have the duration that we give to the panel of assessor is to submit the thesis report by 6 weeks. Okay, and then after that, the student come for the viva was a result come out, and then the student have to do the corrections, and then which is according to the result for the viva voce, and then do the thesis correction, thesis formatting, and then after that the result for the viva voce will be endorsed in the Senate meeting. So this is the current numbers of students who are still not doing their DRP, which is the blue one is within the due date, where the due date for the master student is 6 months, PhD student is 12 months for the full-time, part-time student 12 months, for the master's and 18 months for the PhD. So you can see here, and then you can reflect back to your student if you have any, for cross-check whether they have done the DRP or still not doing the DRP. Okay, so this is a student that have done submit the Viva Voce. They have done the Viva Voce from January until July, and then this is the student who are still pending to accomplish their Viva Voce, waiting. So it's quite big numbers for the PH. For the medic, two students, and then HS, one student, and then I think DS, no from DS, yeah. Okay, then this is the number of students who are doing minor corrections. Yeah, so there's still numbers for the pharmacists. Okay, sorry, is there any questions? All right. And then major corrections, students who are doing the major correction, which we given about 1 year or 12 months for the major corrections, yeah. And then this is a number of graduation, and then the achievement of the IJOT according to the years, where until 2020, at the current moment we have about 105, and then last year 2019 about 238. Bear in mind, this number of graduate is not just for the supervisors, but as well for the university. So with this number 2019 238 and previously 251, we achieve a good MyRA score result. As you know, one PhD student that been graduated, the MyRA score is about 0.06. So if we have about 105, so which means that 2020 MyRA score, we only achieve about 6 marks. So for 238, which is quite a good numbers for the last years. But for this year, 2020, I hope that I can chase all the supervisors and as well for the PhD panels of examiners to speed up their thesis evaluations, and then as well to push the student to do the correction, and they can submit before the December this year, so that they can come for the convo for the next, I think, for the next convo session. For this November convo session will be held, I think, is a convocation by demand. Yeah, the whole detail will be announced by the unit convocation. Before I end this session and pass to Professor Dr. Kalavathy, so this is the borang kehadiran and maklum balas. Please scan and then or type the Google form for the borang kehadiran. Yeah. Okay. Semua dah scan? I can stop sharing now and then pass to Professor Kala.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Aman.
Okay.
Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, saya dengar. I can hear you.
Okay, that's great. Thanks so much, Dr. Aman, for the kind introduction. And let me share my screen first. I can't. Just a minute. Okay. Okay, so you all can see my screen, right? Thank you so much for sharing the status of our students as well, Dr. Aman. And very pleasant evening, everyone. Thank you for being here with us this evening. First of all, IPSis for giving me this opportunity to share with you on evaluating PhD theses, basically from the health and medical sciences perspective. Okay. So you all nampak slide saya kan? No answer means it should be fine. So what I'll be taking you through today is, why do we examine thesis? And a lot of you may be, many of you may be wondering, why am I asking, like, why do we examine thesis? It's obvious that, partly it's duty, because we are in the academics. As academicians, we must examine thesis. But, there's more than just duty. And that's what I would like to share this evening. And then I would like to share a bit on feedback from PhD students. So, a lot of times we as examiners, we give the students a report. But, sometimes it's important that we stop and see the feedback from, the PhD students. So I'll share with you 2 or 3 feedback. So what's their story? How is their feeling, after reading the report? And I'll go on to a bit on thesis examination myth, PhD thesis types, okay? The common examiner practices. Now, this is from a journal that was published based on 803 examiner reports, okay? So the authors actually very beautifully differentiated low and high quality theses. So based on these 803 examiner reports. And then it will be on assessing thesis, and this is the major bulk of it. It's my journey and lessons learned, because I believe that examining thesis, each institution, they have their own criteria, their own guidelines, but that is more of an outline. Assessing thesis, you need a bit of that experience. And finally, I'll go on to the future thesis. So the future thesis is really a question mark. I think this. So I'll go on to first, why do we examine thesis? And this is the first part of my presentation. So I'd like to share with you this video, which was quite, I would say, useful for me as an examiner. So here, I've taken this from Nature. Nature is, of course, all of you know, it's a journal with high impact factor. And basically, it's a very nice video where, I would say, the editors actually requested for 3 leading scientists, who are very senior, to look back at their thesis, and they wanted to see what was their reflection, on their PhD journey. So let's just watch this for about 60 to 90 seconds.
I'm actually really impressed that I understood this at one point. I mean, pages like that. So this is my PhD thesis, which was submitted in 1974 to receive the PhD in chemistry from Yale University, based on the work I did there as a graduate student when I was mostly interested in quantum mechanics. My lab was basically a desk. It was in the basement of the Klein chemistry building. There were no windows. The rest of the people in the group were doing experiments with molecular beam machines. I was the theoretician. And a lot of what I did was pencil and paper. But then once I got to the point where I thought I had a pretty good model, I wanted to calculate exactly what would happen if you did this experiment, and could I even see whether I could make a prediction that could be experimentally verified. So that meant writing programs. I would have to run them at night, anytime after 1 a.m. when the price went down, because my advisor said he could not afford to pay for too many computer charges. So I became a bit of a night owl. It was a little lonely at times. Being there late at night, which I often was, I would interact with other graduate students who kept a night schedule, and there were plenty of them. And one in particular, who was just 1 floor above me, Jay, was working in the lab of a nucleic acid in September of 1973. I convinced my thesis committee that I had done enough work to qualify for the PhD. And they said, okay, you need to go and write. The summer of 73, I was sort of homeless because I sent my wife and daughter on to North Carolina, and I basically moved in with the guy next door, who happened to be a Yale professor, who was willing to let me stay in his house, and tried to start writing, but it was pretty chaotic.
Okay, I shall stop here. Now, I shared with you this video simply because, well, Dr. Collins is actually the director of NIH, the National Institute of Health in USA. And you can see that, this was in 1974. and it was like late nights, typos, self-doubt, despair. So that's the journey of
I'm actually
that's
really
sorry.
impressed that
So
I
that's the
understood
journey
this
of
one.
Dr. Collins. And let's now look at somewhere closer to us. This is Dr. Lim Xiao Meng, who is a staff at pharmacy. So I didn't ask him to take a video, but I told him to draw an emotion chart. I said, can you draw your emotion chart? This is an emotion chart that he did when he was in UNSW. So he took 4 years, and that's a long time for a PhD, right? So you can see based on the emotion chart that, you know, what he went through was frustration, confused, depressed, overwhelmed, exhausted. Okay, so now one thing that we have to remember is the journey of the PhD journey is long, but it's definitely a life-changing journey. I mean, we all would have, we all, I'm sure, would agree, right, that you know, that's the one of the best choices that we made in life. We are where we are today because of that journey. I mean, the choice of doing a PhD. No doubt about doing a PhD. It is truly a long journey, but a life-changing journey. My point here is that thesis is the end product of a long process. So, like I said earlier, why do we actually examine thesis? It's definitely a duty as an academician, but above it all, it's to me it's really a privilege because you see, we are actually evaluating or examining theses that has been written a lot of time, challenges and all that by someone else, right? So I would encourage especially our junior examiners to enjoy, okay, on when you read somebody's thesis, not just do it as a duty, but take it as a privilege. It is a joy, okay, to evaluate thesis, because I believe that people have put a lot of effort into the thesis. So do it joyfully, and just not, you know, with a sword and knife waiting to kill someone. So yeah, now going to the report, back to the report again. Now, a lot of times we have to give the summative assessment, which means that of course we judge a thesis, we examine it, and you know, and to see whether the thesis has met the standards established for the award. So we say whether, you know, no changes, no amendments, minor, major, major with reviva, final, I mean fail. So all that is the final assessment. I would say that that is a summative assessment. But really, that is something that we have to do as an examiner, right? But what is more important is actually the formative assessment. Now, what I mean by a formative assessment is where we examiners actually provide feedback to assist. Our role is actually not just to give a summative assessment, but to give the formative assessment to ensure you help improve the thesis. Okay, the feedback is very important when you are an examiner. So it's not just summative assessment, it is your feedback, which is a formative assessment, which will be very useful for the thesis actually. So I learned this on my own journey when I had my first master student. So I actually had a co-supervisor from a different country, and so I was like, you know, I said, are we sure we are going to submit the thesis? He said, Kala, don't worry. I mean, the role of an examiner is actually to help improve the thesis. So I learned this, that, you know, as examiners, we just don't give the final results, but help improve the thesis. So give your suggestions, because that will be really beneficial to the for the students. Now I'll go on to this is something different, where I actually got this from the Qualitative Report, a journal, where this particular publication, right, article, they shared the story of the students' perspective. Once they read the examiner's report, it was what are the thoughts of the students, okay, after looking at the examiner's report? Because sometimes we are just giving the report without having any feedback from the students. So it's good to pause, stop, and see whether we can improve on our side or not. So Shankar was a Singaporean, and he did his PhD in Australia. So they had 3 examiners. So if you look at this, you can see that 2 examiners accepted the thesis as it was, okay, which means that no changes at all. While the 3rd examiner said that it's major. But the sad thing is that he did not give feedback. He just said that it's a major. It needed a lot of changes. So my point here is that as examiners, if we say it's minor, major, give that feedback. It will be very useful. Don't leave the student, with a question mark, because his point of view is it's quite frustrating. Okay, so what he did was he did not change he just revised only at the end. Okay, so my point is we have to give feedback. Now, Jeff's story is something different. He's also from Australia, and here the examiner took a very long delay for the report. And once again, as examiners, we have to, that's why I showed you that video, just to show you that these students have actually gone through quite a bit challenging time. I'm sure you would have experienced that also. So it's a long journey. So let's not delay further. I know that, as academicians, we have got a lot of work, but 1 or 2 weeks is fine. But I think it's important that we actually give our reports promptly, because someone else, is waiting for that report, because without that report, they can't do anything. They can't work, they can't apply for a job. So on our side as examiners, it's important that we don't delay. We had that problem, in fact, at pharmacy once, and we had to change the examiner after such a long wait. That was an external examiner. So when we get the thesis, try to finish and give the feedback as soon as possible. Now, before I wrap up the first part, I would say that it's important for examiners to walk that extra mile. Okay, go that extra mile. It's never crowded there. Okay, so if we have to sometimes read, the thesis over the weekend, just do it, because you are actually helping someone else. Okay, I'll go to my second part, which is PhD thesis types. I'll go through this very quickly. I'm sure a lot of you know that the types of PhD is conventional or traditional theses, and the second one is the publication-based theses. Now, for publication-based theses, there are 3 types. The PhD by publication, which I don't really support this, because they just basically put in, it's very thin, they just put in their publication and that's it. So the hybrid PhD is at least, they have a standard format, at least there's a bit of consistency. Although it's publication, but it's a hybrid. So they have a standard format, because publication, if you publish in journal A, journal B, different format kan. So hybrid PhD, you will have at least a standard format. That means they have to change a bit. Okay, you cannot just put in your, cannot just compile your papers basically. So there's a standard format. Now, PhD with publications appended is what a lot of us are practicing in Malaysia, where we have the conventional traditional thesis, but we append our publications at the end, okay, which is quite good. And I'm showing you this because most of the Malaysian universities today, you are examiners, you're bound to examine theses from different universities. Most of them actually make publication compulsory, okay. And so I had a student that I co-supervised at UM, and so she had to actually, and for a student at UITM that she is still enrolled, and I hope she graduates sometime. So this student also published 2 papers. My point of showing you this slide is that I think whether you are at UM or UITM, publication is quite important for a thesis, and I support that, because if you look at this this report, okay, in a journal, you can see that publications should be encouraged, and I'll show you in a bit why. And it's actually quite, it's much easier, when students publish the work in a journal, simply because I would say that at least the methodology has been looked at very well, okay. And so I got these 2 theses during MCO, okay. I got this thesis as an external examiner to our medical faculty a few days before MCO. It was a very thick thesis, and one from overseas that was a few days after MCO, yeah, somewhere in March. And the good thing is that that's why you can see I had to actually dry this thesis out because of COVID-19 at that time. That time I was afraid. So you can see that both these theses, the similarity between these 2 was that both the students actually published in Q1 journals. And I'm not saying that just because they have published, I'm going to go through the thesis very quickly. No, it's not that. But my point is, once the students publish in Q1 journals, I can assure you that at least the methodology would have been looked at quite well. Okay, so it makes assessing the thesis or examining the thesis slightly easier. Okay, I'll go on to the third part, which is examination myth. So a lot, what is the average length of PhD thesis? You know, a lot of times we get these questions, and you can see that there is I would say that you know, over the years there is an increase in the number of pages for theses. Okay, but some scientists would like to see shorter theses. Actually, it's easier to examine. When I get a thick thesis, I'll be like, oh, okay, you know, it's really a lot. So sometimes it's easier if you actually read something that is simple, and whatever that is not important, maybe we don't have to put it in. So it's really a myth, you know, that thicker thesis means it's better. So the thicker my PhD, the better has become a myth in the PhD community. Okay, so students could do themselves and their audience a favor by keeping it crisp and short. So I would say that thick thesis does not mean better. Okay. And the second myth is, with publications in Q1 or Q2 journals, there won't be questions in Viva. You know, actually, like I said earlier, publications are important for students, and also examiners will find it easier, yes. But that does not mean that, you know, there'll be no questions in the Viva. Generally, I mean, if I examine a thesis, whether the thesis, you know, has got a publication or not, I still will go through the thesis thoroughly, right? Although it's much easier with publication. Now, there will be questions. These questions are not for the student to address in the thesis, no. But these are questions, you know, where examiners would like to ask during the Viva, whether to see whether the students, whether the work is, you know, originally theirs, the originality, you know, whether it's theirs or not. So we ask students the questions. But the good thing about publication is, like, for example, I put this example of my student. She's a master's student, she's waiting. I mean, she finished her Viva, and you see, she published in this journal, but she still has in her, from chapter 3, some questions. You can see that she doesn't have to change much in the thesis, but these questions are basically for the student to actually answer. And once the student has published the thesis, trust me, published the article, trust me, she can answer. She answered very well, because, you know, the student has written the rebuttal. Then, so once they write the rebuttal, there are a lot of questions. Rebuttal for your publication, when the reviewers ask you to revise or ask a few questions. So basically, some of these questions have been asked by the reviewers of the journal. So I would say that examiners for examining the thesis will still have questions, although, you know, the student has published, but the students will be able to answer, because, you know, they would have gone through all these things during their rebuttal stage for their journal. So yes, there are questions, but students can answer. I'll go to my fourth part. Now, this is basically the common examiner practices. So like I told you, this particular group of authors, they looked at 803 reports, okay, from examiners who are senior, who have got at least 5 years of experience examining theses, and how they differentiated high and low quality theses. Now, generally what they say is that, you see, examiner reports range from 1 line to about 27 pages, but the average is about 2 to 3 pages. Okay, so it depends, you know, on the thesis. Now, what are the most important qualities? You are a young examiner, a thesis examiner. So what is it that you look at? Okay, what are the qualities, the attributes, the characteristics of theses that actually examiners emphasize on their reports? So based on that 803 examination reports, now this one shows the percentage of occurrence. That means that out of the 803 reports, 60% of the examiners actually say the scope of the thesis is very, very important. Okay, so you can see, while this side, it shows, you know, the thesis, like I told you, is from 1 line to 27 pages. The proportion of text, that means that the weightage, how long is their report. Okay, so this is the number of the percentage of people from the 803 reports that say scope of the thesis is important. So I've highlighted the important parts to see. So if you are a young examiner, I would say that this may be quite beneficial. Now, scope of the thesis is about 60%. So they think that it's important for examiners to comment. Okay, scope of the thesis, which means that whether the thesis has enough substance or not, enough research questions, enough objectives. Okay, so that's the scope. And then 79% say that significance, originality, contribution is very important. So in my next part, actually, I go in detail on this part. Significance, originality, and contribution plays an important role because that will actually give you the novelty of your study. And if you look at literature review, a lot of them say coverage is important, okay? And research approach, that is your methodology, 75% of them say that it's really crucial. Subject matter, this is basically your analysis, your reporting, your results, 93%. So if you look at the bulk of it, now this is the most important, which means your subject matter, your results, the way you analyze, the way the student has interpreted, all that is very, very high. 93% of the 803 reports show this. It's very important, okay? And you can see that 38.5% of proportion of text, they commented on the results, how they analyze, how they report. Communication competence is basically substance, whether they go wrinkle, whether there's really scientific substance there, that's 80%. And communicative competence, this is basic editorial. So, people get irritated, examiners get irritated to see editorial mistakes. Okay, so 56% have reported. Now, the other high percentage is on use of first person. Basically, this is student's perspective, whether the student is able to synthesize, to criticize, and all that, So that is the student's perspective, and that is 85%. So that's quite high. Okay, so let's look at what are the principles of high and low quality theses. You can see that, based on this 803 report, these authors actually have divided them into thesis, topic, and approach. They say that the significance and the novelty of the study is very, very important, okay? And that makes a high quality thesis. While the literature review is not just about reporting, what people have done, but you see here, and I will explain later, it's how the students actually write the thesis and use that literature. Okay, because the literature is a very important part of the thesis actually for the student. Because from the literature review, if the literature review is done very well, the method, okay, and it can be used, that literature in your chapter 2 too, you can use it for your discussion, because you have all your literature in chapter 2, so you can actually use that in your discussion. So so literature is it's not just what people have done, but how we use it, for our methodology, how we use it for our discussion. So the use of the literature is important, okay, which I'll share with you in a bit. And of course, communicative competence is when, there's a lot of editorial mistakes. And very often, high quality thesis, okay, even if it's a traditional thesis, we will say, how many publications will arise from this thesis, okay? So previously, like I used to do for UPM, I will say that, you still can publish on this part. So that makes a high quality thesis. Okay, so I'll go on to assessing theses, my journey, okay, and the lessons learned. I think that, when I look back and I see what I did, about 15 or 20 years ago, it's different, okay? So that experience, that bit may help our young examiners. Now, when I first get a thesis, okay, so I personally would look at it positively. Okay, when you get a thesis, takkan you tembak the thesis terus fail, takkan? So when you get a thesis, the first thing you do is that, you have a positive feeling. You feel that this thesis will pass, okay? That's the general idea lah bila you dapat thesis tu. But as examiners, we have to remember that this is a PhD thesis. This is not a Nobel Prize, okay? So your expectations should be to add new knowledge to the existing whatever knowledge that we have, just to add a bit more. If we can get 1 or 2 parts would be great. So remember, your expectations is not Nobel Prize. Nobel Prize tu bertahun-tahun kan, memang lebih daripada, it's what, 30-40 years of your life, or 50 years. So it's very different. So our expectations as examiner has to be right. So generally I will be positive about it, because I would have thought that the supervisor would have gone through the thesis. But sometimes, what happens is we may be disappointed, okay, because I think that the supervisor did not go through. So that's the first feeling that you get, okay? And when I get a thesis, a piece of thesis, what do? The first thing that I do is I will go through the thesis generally, just to have an idea, to see where the student stands, okay? And then I will go in detail. So generally, again, if I will read the abstract, I will read the introduction. From these 2 introduction, I will be able to gauge whether the thesis is high or low quality. Trust me, because if the student has written a fantastic introduction, something that will shine, that the thesis will be something really exciting. You will be very excited to read examine the thesis. But if the student has written the introduction sometimes can be challenging, then you will know what's the quality like. So when we are examining the thesis, or even as supervisors, please ensure that your abstract and introduction, these are very important parts of the thesis, and where the examiner will be able to gauge the quality of the thesis, okay? So, and usually I'll comment directly, on the thesis, and, a lot of post-it, I will fold, and, I will mark directly. And only after that, actually, I will comment, because it depends on where the thesis is from. They have got their own institutional guidelines, and then I will adjust according to what they require. But what is important, like I said earlier, what I stressed, is not just the results, but my feedback. Now, the first part that I would look at, whether the institution requires for me to write the robustness of the thesis, whether it requires or not. I, as an examiner, this is something that I will do for all my theses that I examine. I will always start off with this, and then I will go on to their format, because I feel that the student should get an idea of where they stand. Okay, so I always, the first part of my thesis, after their title, after their name, is robustness of the thesis. I will give them a very general overview or idea of where they stand, what the thesis is like, okay, their work, comment on their work a bit. So this is something that I will comment, even if not asked. The main comments are usually so sorry. I guess you all, can you all hear me now? I lost the connection.
Okay.
Can you all hear me?
Okay.
Thank you so much. So I guess I'll start from the robustness of the thesis. Is that fine?
Okay.
Okay, thanks. So sorry, I am at FF1, but I'm not sure why. Okay, now I'll go on to the first part, which is robustness of the thesis. Now, this is something that, whether the institution guideline has or it doesn't have, I will still share on this part. This will be basically one paragraph. Now, this is something that I will comment even if not asked, and the main comments are usually the significance and novelty of the study, sound methodology, whether the candidate has used the right method and analyzed properly, the ability to look at the results properly, and even the discussion, whether they can actually constructively criticize, the results and discuss properly. And finally, to outline the thesis statement in the conclusion, and I will also tell them whether which part is publishable. So we have to remember that novelty doesn't mean discovery of a new drug, of course. It's original work, it doesn't mean a cure to cancer, but it means one step to advancing knowledge. Now, that's something that we examiners must know. And okay, so let's look at the abstract. Now, I'll go through with you. I know I have got about 20 minutes. I'll go through with you very quickly each part. It may be useful for our young people. So now, if I look at an abstract, the first thing that I see is when I see that it's more than one page, right, my heart will a bit, I'll be sad, because I think that the student must be able to write the abstract within one page, okay? Because an abstract is an advertisement for the thesis. It has to be concise and it is standalone. And, by reading the abstract, they should be able to sort of understand a bit of the study, okay? There must be clear conclusion and take-home message. But the common pitfall is that when it's more than one page, and the students sometimes put all the results. I mean, come on. The student must be able to differentiate what are the important ones. What is it that, is important, must be must be able to differentiate that. And the take-home message must be clear. Okay, I'll go on to the introduction. Now, if you look at the introduction, like I said earlier in my talk, I said that the introduction is a very important part of the thesis. Now, because I have read introduction of students' thesis, I really was not able to understand, what is this study about, okay? So by reading that 4 pages to sangat penting ya, it should reflect, it should give you an overview of the whole thesis, okay? And it's possible, trust me, it's possible. It's just a formula, okay, of writing introduction. And this chapter will tell us if the candidate is enthusiastic of the subject matter. So if the student is clear with what he or she is going to do in the next part, the intro will be good. So you can know whether it's a high quality or low quality thesis just by, because you can see, whether the student has put in, is passionate about it. So I'll go through with you very quickly and give you examples. Now, the requirements are, of course, standard. Like I told you, an introduction is a formula, problem statement, existing solutions, limitations to the existing solutions, and hypothesis that is backed up by scientific evidence, and the objectives, right? Now, the common pitfall, the ones that I always see is that they have the problem statement. Obviously, they know what. Of course, they will write something in the objective, but in between though, it's rojak a bit, okay? So it's not very clear. Now, that is the common pitfall, I would say, okay, when examining thesis. And I think students are not, they have to explain what other people have done. So they don't do that. Sometimes they explain what others have done, but they don't put the gap. So what is new? Okay, you can say what people have done. Okay, maybe they would have written that part well, but what is new? What is the new knowledge in your part? And you cannot just say, I want to do this, but you want to do that based on, it must be backed up by some scientific publication. So the hypothesis must be backed up, okay? And what can be irritating is irrelevant references. So I would say that, when we examine thesis, these are the areas that is important for us to look at. Now, I will not go on formulate your research because there's not very much time, but I just want to show you what are the gaps of the study. Okay, so this is not like a thesis, but you see, when the student is clear with the gaps, clear with the hypothesis, which is it has got backed up by scientific information, then the introduction will be a good one. Okay, I'll go on to the literature review. Now, for a literature review, a lot of times, okay? I will quickly flip through to see how many pages, I will panic if it's a lot, because sometimes it's really lesson. They will write a lot. But what is important, and you can see whether the student can understand or not, is whether usually the literature part, right, it has to flow always this format, where from the main parts, I think I have it here. So from the big section, it goes very narrow down to your area. Okay, that's the flow generally. Now, a lot of times, students, for the literature review, students will just write it like a catalog of literature. It's not. It is actually to critically review the literature. Now, this part, if students are able to embrace or understand, what is the importance of literature, it will help. It will be very useful for their methodology and their discussion. So it's just not a catalog of literature, but I'll show you in a bit. It's to synthesize right from the beginning. Because the student can publish it as a review paper. Second, because once you understand your literature, you critically look at it. Okay, look at your literature, arrange them according to lump them according to or group them according to a certain area. You can get more out of it, because that will strengthen your methodology in the sense that, okay, you know exactly that the methods that you use are validated, based on what people have done, and it will also be useful for your discussion at the end. Okay, so you as an examiner, you can see whether it's just a catalog of literature or there's some kind of thinking there. Okay, and so again here, for literature, it's just not about the length, the number of pages. It's about looking at how their storyline is, how it flows from one part to another. So a lot of times it's not original sources and incorrect references, irrelevant literature, main theoretical framework is missing, not able to link. This is very common. Okay, suddenly, what is not important is a different place. And the catalog of literature. These are very common pitfalls made in the literature. But if the student is able to really appreciate, work that have been done by others, it will be very useful for their method and discussion. Now, this is one of my students who master student, but you see, this is her literature review, which we actually took the whole thing out to be published in Journal of Neuroscience Research. So you can see that, and here supervisors play an important role. They have to guide the students, okay, how to group them. And you see, this is another one where we also sent it out for publication, and it's now at rebuttal stage. It's lifted, basically really taken out from the chapter 2 to be for publication. You can see that here, an example, okay, they compare dopaminergic populations between mammals and zebrafish. So you got mammals, you got zebrafish, and here it shows the area of interest. So the student has put a lot of thought into, okay, now I'm going to divide this into olfactory bulb, talent saffron, the different areas. Okay, can you see? And so she has beautifully put the different references. And this she just finished her Viva actually, and you can see that the report was good. Now, simply because, a lot of thoughts have been put into even the literature. And I'll show you now this diagram. So here is different toxins that she used to induce neurodegeneration in the brain of the zebrafish. So there are various ways. So this, she put it in her literature review, and it clearly shows why she chose 6-OHDA. She chose this, you see. So I feel that, if the student is able to put this part in the literature, you can use it in the discussion. So all this would be very useful for, for the examiners as well. Now, for methodology, this is a lot of times, right? Method is a very important part where students, the common pitfalls is they don't have a flow chart. You know, they'll have chunks of things written without a proper flow chart. Very often in my report, I will say, can you all please have a general flow chart? It will give an idea to the examiner, you know, be user-friendly, basically. You know, imagine when, I think a lot of times, you know, you'll be able to see this. They will have chunks of methods, but they fail to put in flowchart, so it's not user friendly, not in sections, okay, and inappropriate methods used. So methods must be validated, and selected methods were not justified, principles not well explained. And as for the experimental design, now this is the major part. Now, if we are we always check whether ethics has been approved, and about the number, you know, the statistics that is used a lot. Okay, if we're talking about experimental design, there are a lot of things, you know, and a lot of time, whether it the right positive control is used, how samples were collected, whether there are any confounding factors like, you know, drugs taken by the subjects, and of course the right statistical tool. So these are all common pitfalls that we see and we ask as examiners. We will always ask, ethics adata, what is the number? How did you calculate? What was the positive? Why was this the positive control? Why was this the vehicle? And then what are the inclusion, exclusion criteria? So these are standards, okay, that we always ask. Now, I'm just trying to show you here that it's very important that you choose the right model. Okay, for example, for this particular project, I want to use this transgenic mice. Why? Okay, because it shares many characteristics with human frail subjects. So we really have to have that evidence. And again, here, frailty index assessment is not easy in animal models. So you must have validation for all these. Okay, we cannot just when we examine thesis, look for all this, whether the method is very important, okay, whether the models used are right or not. And I'll go on to the results. Now, for results, the biggest mistake I always see is, you know, they will report as they get, but there is no interpretation of the data. So what does the result tell you? Sometimes they will just have many tables, you know, you have 10 tables when you can actually put all that in one table, can? So I think that what I mean, my group and I always do is when we get data, quickly put it, you know, as the student is doing the lab work, put it in nice data with like how you are going to publish, like it's going to be published tomorrow. Ensure that it's user friendly with proper title, with all the captions, everything clear, okay? So I think that the ability to interpret is important. How does that result speak to you? Okay, significant matters. Sometimes we see higher, lower, without any significant value. Actually, there's no meaning, kan? If that the p-value, and ability to present the results in a clear, structured way. So sometimes this is something that I've seen in PhD thesis. Both, I don't know, maybe they want to make the thesis thicker, kan? Both table and figure. Okay, same data. And the student actually must be able to differentiate what can be put in appendix and what is in the main thesis, kan? So they must be able. Sometimes some students put all their data in the main thesis. Some can go to the appendix. Now, I think that extracting data from the studies it's good if students can actually have a clear, put it all in a spreadsheet, and from that spreadsheet actually get out whatever details. So then you have got some kind of interpretation of your data. You really have to look at to make use of it. So you can see the background. Now here is the Excel, okay? But from this data, how do you actually put the metabolites in a pathway? So all this needs a bit of thoughts. And this is by my student too. So you can see that she got a lot of results, but at one look, you can see which one is up-regulated, which one is down-regulated, which one has got no differences, which one is replicated many times. So I think this kind of information is very important. Now, for the discussion part, the common pitfalls are very often, you see in the discussion, they will repeat the results again, the first few lines too, every part, they will repeat again the results. So don't have to repeat that, okay? And they do not mention the novelty clearly. So if it's a good thesis, they will tell you what's the strength of the thesis, what is the contribution, and link should be drawn between the findings and literature. It's not just that I got this person got this, it's the same. No, very often they try to link, but without any synthesis. So actually the student must be able to put everything separately, put it all out clearly and see, what it says. Application of the findings, a lot of times, if necessary, okay, sometimes it's not applicable, but if there is application, please, they must put it in. And very often students miss these limitations and future perspective. There must be limitations in your study. Now address them. Okay, you must be able to address what are the limitations of your study or the future perspective. So I would say that in general, appearance counts. And I just want to share with you, since we are in the discussion conclusion area, that you see now once you have all these in your result section, then if the student is able to get all these in figures, and they can actually come up with their own mechanism. So this is something that they draw. So if you look at my thesis, my student's thesis, this one is chapter 3. Okay, she has one major conclusion at the end. Now this you can actually talk about, you can come up with your own sort of hypothesis in a mechanistic approach, simply because you have analyzed your data well. Okay, so for each chapter, all these are drawn by herself. Okay, she based on her results. Now this is what she thinks is happening. Okay, so I'll not go on to detail. We've got another 5 minutes now. For the presentation and clarity. Okay, so once you've got all the conclusion, we also look at how is the thesis presented in general. Okay, actually, examiners are happy when it's like a story. You tell a story, okay? But the common pitfalls is it does not flow. And yeah, what is very irritating is when there are many. In the first line, the ada grammatical error, pening kan? So these are things that I think supervisors should also look at. So now I don't want to go through the errors. I mean, we all would have experienced it, and I think it's time that we as supervisors actually also ensure that it doesn't happen. And references, there's a very common mistakes. And usually thesis should be typically between 80,000 to 100,000 words. It's about 160 pages. And I think presentation generally, it depends. I don't think I would like to share this here. Never mind. I'll skip this due to time. Now, what about the last part, which is integration, coherence, contribution to knowledge? Now, students have to remember that, this is not a diary, okay? It's really logical link or good flow between various parts of the thesis. And a lot of times people ask me actually, so for a PhD thesis, how much is enough? Actually, if the student is able to publish in two papers in very good journals, then it should be enough for a PhD. Okay, at least minimum 2 good papers should be out of the PhD. So that is the quality of, I would say, a good thesis. Okay, and originality should be mainly the candidate's own work. Okay, you cannot outsource too much of the work. So we come to quite to the end. So how do we differentiate between minor or major amendments? Okay, so very seldom, I think it's about 1% of theses actually are awarded without any amendments. So far, I don't think I have, as an examiner, it's usually, I've not had one thesis that went without any amendments. Okay, so usually, now minor and major. Now minor is, if it's like editorial and then maybe the literature review is not done very well, all that is to me minor. But what is a major? Major is only when there are real major issues in the methodology, no novelty. So it's not, to give a major is really, it depends on mainly the significance, methodology, interpretation of results can still, depend. If it's too much, then it will be a major. Okay, so the most important is the methodology and whether there's novelty. We can discuss this further. And in the final part is the future thesis. This is a question. Okay, this is a question for IPSis. I mean, I'm so glad that we now have a publication after, I guess, from 2018. Each PhD student must publish two papers in journals before they graduate, which is good. You know why? Because actually at the end of the day, I realized from my experience, when students have publications in their thesis, in their CV, they get jobs faster. And, you know, if they're going out in academics, the publications, it's like a practice, they do it at the uni. So they still got support from their supervisor. So to me, publications are a good way of assessing thesis. And I know this is not now, but in the future, some of them are doing this. Okay, when I was a PhD student, I used to write proposals. Okay, so ability to work in collaborative research, but of course, all these are difficult to assess. It's not for now; it's for the future. It's for IPSis to think, ability to manage a research grant, ability to chair committees. And so these are things that will make a student really wanted out there. Okay?
It's 16 hours.
Okay. So to me, all in all, what I can conclude as examiners are, we must give feedback because we rise by lifting others. Okay, so help the students as well. And I would like to end with Selamat Menyambut Hari Malaysia, everyone. So with that, thank you and all the best. Back to you, Dr. Aman. Is Dr. Aman still around? Is Dr. Aman still there? Okay, so while we wait for Dr. Aman, I really can't. Maybe we just will begin with the Q&A session. If anybody has got any questions while waiting for Dr. Aman.
Hi, thank you, Prof.
Welcome, Dr. Aman.
Nah,
Okay.
saya kena lari sana, lari sini ya.
So yeah, it's the Q&A. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to.
Oh, nama Prof Kala tak ada dalam tu eh? Okay. Nanti I betulkan kejap. I will give you all the new link ya. Nanti you give me 5 minutes, boleh tak?
Okay.
Yeah, everybody give me 5 minutes. Prof Kala punya section tu. Nanti saya betulkan sekejap ya. And then after that you isi balik lah. Tapi link tu dah ada kan? Link dah ada, okay. So thank you very much, Prof.
You're welcome.
Okay.
My pleasure, Dr. Aman.
Yeah, so if you have anything, soalan dah ada tadi ya? Q&A. Ada Q&A tak? Soalan kepada Prof Kala? Any questions? Natalie, ada soalan? Tak ada. Okay, thank you very much. So I think kita boleh stop kat sini. Ada soalan? Ada tak? Ada soalan? Tak ada.
There's one question here. Selalunya internal, external, or overseas yang lambat hantar report. Okay. So there's this question whether who, internal, external, or overseas yang lambat hantar report. So maybe this one Dr. Aman lagi experience, but from my experience is that it really depends lah. Internal is usually still under control kan. From our experience is the external. I don't know. Maybe Dr. Aman will be able to give a better, clearer picture on that.
Yeah, kalau I ada record sebenarnya, everything we recorded dekat IPSis ni. So selalunya internal yang lambat sikit. Kalau
Oh,
external university tu yang selalu yang paling cepat. Selalunya lah.
okay.
That's from the data lah. So that's
I have
why.
a question here.
Yeah, betul.
Yeah, Dr. Lim from Faculty of Pharmacy. Prof. Kala, thank you for the presentation. Just a question on how do you usually prepare yourself before, the Viva VOC, right? Because that is face-to-face thesis examination as opposed to what you have presented, that is behind the scene. So how do you prepare yourself before you actually go for the face-to-face Viva VOC?
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. So thank you, Dr. Stephen, for your question. Basically, what I'll do is we go through, because we have got Post-it, we have folded the thesis. Like I told you, the first thing we do is we actually look at the thesis and report there directly, right? So we will go through all the questions because not everything is in the report. So we will actually quickly go through the thesis, usually a day before the Viva, and we will have many questions, I'm sure, right, to ask. And to prepare, I would say, is just to go through the comments. But what is more important is during the Viva session, we have to remember that we would like to encourage the candidate. So give them that opportunity to answer. It's not, do not put that fear, but we want to see the originality, because the best way you can see whether the student has conducted is during the Viva, whether the student has conducted the experiments is during the Viva. So you can ask them basic questions, and all this. And usually I do it one day before the Viva itself. One day should be enough because we have examined the thesis anyway. Okay, so we have a few questions here. If we had published during, we have published during Viva, still can considered as novelty? Well, Dr. Hasmiza, to me, you see, novelty is the student has published the manuscript, okay? And you see, your thesis belongs to the university. Like for us, it belongs to UiTM. Kita tak publish thesis tu again, kan? So it shouldn't be an issue on novelty because your publication is only once. That is when you publish in the journal. The whole thing can be in the thesis because our thesis dekat UiTM ni, we are not publishing it as a book chapter anywhere. So it shouldn't be published anywhere else as a book chapter or in another journal. As long as we are okay with that, we are in the right track. So I hope I've answered Dr. Hasmiza. Yeah? So Dr. Mahdi, how long do you take to examine a thesis? Do you read chapter by chapter on different days? Now, okay, so how long do you take to examine a thesis? It really depends on how nice or easy is it to read the thesis, the quality of the thesis. Now, when the thesis is of high quality, you are excited, you will finish it quite fast, okay? And very often, like personally for me, I will do it during the weekends or after work. Usually I do that. And like how long, because some thesis that is not written well, it really takes longer. Okay, so it depends on how the quality of the thesis actually. But give yourself about 1 to 2 weeks to read the thesis. Okay, Dr. Ravi, how extensively the literature review should be covered in the thesis? What is the expectation of an examiner? Now, if you're talking about the literature review, I would say, at least you should have 5 to 6 major sections. And I always encourage students to imagine that your literature review is, you can use it for publication. So that is also another story. So it starts with a broad picture of what you're talking about, your area of research, slowly narrow down, go on to what are the most important, the core of what the thesis is all about. Okay, so it has to cover at least 5 to 6 major sections. Okay, I guess that's about it. It's all Google Forms already.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm done.
So ada satu soalan lagi, Prof. Kala. Sometimes we have a PhD thesis submitted if not qualified to be passed for a PhD degree. Can we downgrade the PhD degree. Okay, so yang ni I kena jawab. Sorry. So there is no yang for the MPhil kita tu belum ada dalam peraturan akademik kita. We don't have that downgrading of the PhD to the MPhil. Yeah, but for your information, for the now we're going to have a PhD fast track, isn't it? You tahu kan semua? Everybody knows about that? Yeah. So for the PhD fast track, there will be an interim progress report that the student have to complete it. So untuk 2 tahun yang kemudian nanti, selepas daripada dia dia mendaftar 2 tahun sebagai PhD student, as a fast track PhD student, there will be interim report that the student have to do the present, submit. Then dalam evaluation tu, kalau dia tak pass the evaluation, they will go back to the master degree. Tapi bukan semasa menghantar viva, ya, bukan semasa menghantar thesis. Ya. Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay tak? Alright. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Kalavathy.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
yeah. So I hope you all have enjoyed the session that have been given by the Prof. Kala. And then Prof. Kala, kalau we invite them, you lagi, nanti insyaAllah boleh terima lagi, ya.
Thank you.
Alright. Okay.